This is the second video in our series on remodeling an older home. And in this video, we are going to take a tour of this house, or should I say the house framing. And this is what a home might look like if built with rough sawn lumber in the 1940s and possibly the 1930s and 1950s, where we have spaced sheeting because we're going to be using cedar shingles. Now let's go ahead and remove everything down to the floor joists and take a look at what the floor framing might look like. And for those of you who know a little bit about framing, you're probably wondering where the treated lumber is or even the anchor bolts. And you're not going to find them because this is an older house. And I left them out because I've worked on plenty of homes that look just like this. So let's go ahead and remove the foundation so we can take a look at our 6-inch deep footings. This is something else that I've seen on older homes. Instead of an area here where we go 12 inches into the ground, we've only went 6 inches into the ground, and that's 6 inches for everything, including all of the pads that we are going to have for our piers or support beam footings. And since we're going to be using 4x6, we're not going to want to space these out more than 8 feet. And we're going to equally space them throughout the building. You can go back to the floor plan and take the overall width of the building and divide it into thirds to find the distance between the piers. And you can take the length of the building and divide it equally by these spaces here, 5 spaces, to find the on-center spacing this way. So let's go ahead and put the foundation back in there. And then take a look at our pockets. These are usually going to be areas that our support beams will be sitting in. And of course our concrete piers with the post here to support the beams that will be supporting the floor framing. So again, our pockets right here will be supporting the end of the beam. And for those of you wondering why these aren't treated beams or why they don't have something in between the lumber and the concrete, that's because they just didn't worry about it back then. And I do have to say, doing repairs and remodels to building, I rarely came across a situation where this part of the beam was rotted unless there was some type of water damage problem. For example, some water leaking onto that area. Now I wanted to provide you with 2 different versions. I wanted to provide you with this one here, which I've seen plenty of times, and then a picture of something that I've seen a little more often, where you might have a flat piece of lumber underneath the post. And in California, even though they didn't use treated lumber during that period of time, they often used redwood, and that would include redwood sills also. However, you didn't run into it on every project. So we're going to start with a nice flat, perfectly level foundation and sill plates, and maybe they would have even double checked it back then. Now that is probably not the case. I don't want to get carried away here. And of course we have our foundation vent cutouts over here so that we can get some ventilation in the crawl space and a better view of how the beam might fit into the pocket here. Along with our blocking, our joists are 24 inches on center. Another thing that I ran into often. And if you're wondering how the sill plate was attached, what did they do to prevent the plate from moving? Well, it wasn't uncommon to find nails attaching almost any type of wood to concrete. And in some cases, it was a nail that looked like something you would use on a horseshoe. And for all I know, who knows, maybe it was a horseshoe nail. Next up, let's go ahead and install our 1x6 diagonal sheathing. And this was commonly used before plywood. And I can't tell you how many homes I worked on that had this type of flooring, or how many of these boards needed to be replaced while I might have been repairing or remodeling a certain part of the home. Next up, let's go ahead and install our wall framing, and I'm going to do you a favor here and remove all of the foundation because the sheathing was affecting my eyes, and I figured it might do the same with you. and I think it's going to provide us with a better visual presentation. Now, the one thing I did in this house is made every one of the windows the exact same size. And I realize that might not be something you're going to see in a home like this. I have worked on homes like that, so thought I would put it in this design. So here we have the front door going into a little entry area, and another door going into the living room. And then here we have one of the bedrooms. Next up, let's go ahead and head over to the bathroom and the other bedroom. And for those of you wondering why this window is so low, that's because they often only had bathtubs back then, and they didn't need to have a high window. Back door to the house, all of our windows, dining room, kitchen. Next up, let's head to the other side of the house here where we don't have any windows in the dining room. However, we have a couple of corner windows in the living room. And this is probably going to be the wall that most of you are going to want to remove to open up this area. Next up, let's head over to the pantry and the bedroom closet. Pantry, bedroom, closet. And for those of you who have noticed, we have one beam in the house. And for the rest of the openings, we have a 2x4 that's turned up on its side and a shaped piece of lumber for this part, and only one top plate. Again, trying to provide you with another situation you could run into on one of your projects. And of course, the hallway and the bathroom. Another view of it there. And then let's go ahead and head over to the front bedroom where we have the closet for the bedroom here and the entryway. Another view of the entryway from this section. And now let's go ahead and take a top view where we can get a better idea about the living room entry, bedroom, closet, bedroom over here, small hallway, bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, closet again, pantry, and dining room. Next up, let's go ahead and install the ceiling joist. And even though I made this section here 2x6, it is not going to be uncommon to find 2x4 here, even if it's going to be 14 feet. I cannot tell you how many projects I ran across like that. And of course, the infamous strong back. And this would have been a 2x4 or even a 2x6 turned up on edge and then toe-nailed into the tops of the joist on both sides to try and keep these long sections as straight as they possibly could. However, in some cases, it didn't really help much. And for those of you wondering why we don't have any midspan blocks or blocks over here, I'm not about to suggest your house won't have them. However, this house doesn't. And to keep the joist straight, they would often either use the strong back or nail a flat 2x4 like we have here and over here to the top of the ceiling joist. And for those of you wondering why these aren't next to each other, like you might find in a roof truss framing system, it's because these boards were often placed in the center of the rooms. And if you remember, the kitchen was a little bit smaller because of the pantry. Next up, let's take a look at how the joist might lap in a situation like this in the bathroom. And keep in mind, this is all 2x4, like I said. And if there's no 2x6 on the job, you're probably going to see a 2x4 here. And this board right here is providing us with drywall nailing backing for the corner here. Or in this case here, lath backing, back when they used to lath and plaster the interiors. And of course, we are going to need a crawl space into the attic. And back then, I believe they still had a minimum of 22.5 inches by 22.5 inches. Now, something else that you used to see was instead of a 2x6 like we have here, we'd often have a 1x6 for ceiling backing. Let's go ahead and remove the walls to get another view here. And this is probably something I'm going to start doing more of in my videos because it seems to provide viewers with an unobstructed view of this particular section of the framing. Next up, let's go ahead and throw in some roof rafters. And those roof rafters will be spaced 24 inches on center. And we are going to be using 2x6 because of the wider span of this particular building. Next up, let's go ahead and install our blocks. And engineers at this particular time were not concerned about perimeter nailing, so the blocks didn't really need to attach to the framing plates. And of course, since we have a straight gable roof here with a 1x6 ridge, another thing that wasn't that uncommon, again because they weren't worried about perimeter nailing, where today we have to have thicker ridges to create the perimeter nailing we need around the perimeter of the roof framing that you're going to get from the plywood roof sheathing that you might not get from spaced sheathing. Next up, let's go ahead and install our gable studs. And the spacing back then might have been 16 inches on center. However, it wasn't uncommon to find these spaced a little further apart. And of course, our barge rafter here, our barge rafter is not going to die into the ridge. It's not going to connect to the ridge because they were often supported by the 1x6 that cantilevered over and held the barge rafter up. Or should I say, held the barge rafter up enough because it wasn't uncommon, again, for this section of the roof to sag, especially if you had 2 or 3 layers of roofing. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at our collar ties, 1x4s that are spaced 4 foot on center, or every other rafter in this situation. And again, our barge rafters here were going to be supported by the cantilevered 1x6 roof sheathing. And it wasn't uncommon to have a situation where you used the same roof sheathing, 1x6, and then put one of the smaller pieces in between the longer ones so that we could end up with a nice solid area underneath the eaves. So let's go ahead and wrap the tour of this video up. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions for videos in this series, then let me know by leaving a comment in the comment area.